Adventurers Podcast. I'm your host, Nate, and we're here with our second January podcast, and we're still talking about developing great characters. And now, this week, we're going to be talking about things from the players to the GMs. So, as I am always GM, well, 90% of the time I'm GM.
Have you introduced us? Yes.
I'm here in the studio with Ranger Liz.
Hi, everyone. I am Ranger Liz.
One of the best character developers I know. And Lich Lord Bryan.
Hello.
One of the best statistical character developers I know.
I do crunch more than anything else. I'll admit that.
And they're both going to be talking to me about encouraging character development at the table. And to our viewers out there, my fellow GMs. So, I turn the table over to you. I'm at your mercy.
Okay.
The biggest thing I would want from games is to have some reference point in terms of where my character possibly fits in to the universe. One of the things that I kind of derided a little bit when I first read 5e was something like the tables for like your background and everything, for like your bond, your background, and all those other things, because I felt it was just like hand-holding a little bit. But it does give you some ideas. I especially like some of the backgrounds that are in like the module for Horde of the Dragon Queen, where it connects your characters to the adventure you're running. It makes sure that they have some kind of reference that where you can guarantee you're connecting your characters in some way together. I'm far more able to make a character when I know how my character is possibly going to fit into the universe.
Okay.
So, and those can always, and even if you add something to my character that I didn't just necessarily have, it gives me another thing where I can go with too. So, okay. Which is why if I run Horde of the Dragon Queen, you will be assigned a certain background.
Who, me?
No, everyone.
Okay.
I'm probably going to roll them up a little bit, but I have certain specific backgrounds that there's a background in Horde of the Dragon Queen I know you would love, so I might make that Nate.
Yeah, letting your players know what kind of backgrounds, especially if it's a world that is your own creation, you definitely want to let them know what they're going into. And at that point, I'm not afraid to sometimes add an additional, like, my own character in. That way, if there's any confusion, maybe my own character can give them a slight ideas to some of the lore that maybe I accidentally forgot to mention before, and still let them be in character. Now, another thing that I like to do to encourage roleplay, and it's another reason why I sometimes like to put my own character in so they have something to bounce off of, is in almost any situation, just sort of go around the table and ask them what they're going to do. Because sometimes it turns into a whole big role-playing experience. Be prepared that might end up delaying your game. But, yeah, you pretty much go, hey, you guys came into town, what are you going to do? Well, I'm going to go to the tavern, and I'm going to go do this. And then
another thing I was going to mention is, I noticed a lot of times for us, the first day we're doing everything, 90% of that is character creation anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Because we have a tendency to elaborate the character creation process a little bit. At least Mike does.
Oh, yeah.
Which is the only problem with it is because if your character dies, sorry. You have to take another full day to recreate your character. But since especially if your character creation does take that long, spend part of that day discussing where the part of the world they're in, so they can. Not everything in the character creation has to be just like the crunch ability of your character. Discuss ways they might work their crunch into the world, or discuss where the world is, what's this area they're in, what kind of discuss. Make sure there's a discussion about the world as well.
Okay.
Because especially when there are times where like I'm working with you and you're talking with it, you can be talking with it so it can help them out with their character creation. Because just discussing ways to make my character more effective at what I wanted to do, it doesn't really help them, especially when they want to do something completely different. It's so you can also be helping them at the same time as helping me.
Okay.
At least in that regard, rather than having to go back into just have the crunch stuff. So. And it's something I should work with too. So, because I occasionally do GM. So.
Yeah. I think that is actually a big one right there. Is during the character setup, discuss a bit about the world around them. I'll admit I've probably been pretty bad with that.
Mostly, and that's part of the reason I can't get into Exalted, because I just don't know enough about the world. Whereas if we run Iron Kingdoms, I know everything about that world. I can, or as more than anyone else at the table, obviously. You're second, but I still probably dwarf you in knowledge about Iron Kingdoms. Yes. Just how you would probably dwarf me in knowledge about the 40k universe and Exalted.
Well, yes, because those are... I love the 40k universe for its role-playing setting. I used to love it for the war game. Loved the customization the war game offered. And very angry with Games Workshop right now. So
it happens.
It happens.
I got really angry at Z-Man Games for a little while. I'm still not going to buy that one expansion, but I'll buy another game from them.
Yep. And that, and with my work schedule and school schedule, I don't have time to, go down and play Warhammer 40k anymore.
That makes sense too. So, but on back to the.
But back onto the subject, I think that is actually one thing that, if I did start doing that, would that help, the two of you, when we go through to do, with the release of the Exalted Let's Play, or any future Let's Plays?
It would definitely help. We don't necessarily have to record that part of it, but it would definitely help, simply so we have some bearings on what we're trying to do and how a character that we're trying to make might act. Or if we were going to play against type, how playing against the type would act.
Okay. By the way, viewers, if you'd like to actually hear this part of our games and, listen in on this, please leave a comment down below.
We need to put a tagline before that shameless plug.
we keep asking for comments, but we still haven't got any.
We badger you enough, you'll do it.
Eventually, we're hoping that you guys will
Maybe if we beg a little harder.
Or maybe we do some research and come to their houses and ask for their opinion. We won't do that. We truly don't.
We get our ideas, your geography. I think if we push a little harder, we might be able to get more.
I won't have the motivation to do that.
Neither. I have no hacking skills. So.
And I have no ability to drive out that far.
Fly, even. We've had a few people watch from other
countries,
from across the pond.
Which one?
I don't remember.
The one that's called the Atlantic.
I know.
I think there's some people that are on the others.
Yeah, and then we've also had a few from across the Pacific.
Okay.
Yeah, so
that's the
both
lake?
ponds.
Would that be across the lake then?
It might be. I don't know.
I think that one's the puddle.
It's not really. Well, it's a puddle if you look at it from Alaska. Because from Alaska, can't you practically see?
Russia, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's still not a puddle. That's the Bering Strait. If the Atlantic is a pond, the Pacific cannot be a puddle.
Anyway. So what other advice do you guys have for us GMs?
Okay, let's see. Other than round robin, and let them decide where they're going. I know it's really easy just to railroad your players, but give them free range. Let them make their own stupid mistakes, and yeah, they might have to deal with some of the consequences. Maybe you'll soften up some of the consequences because you think it's stupid that they get killed in a bar fight as opposed to being killed by the boss that you set up for them to be killed by. But that's not the important thing. The important thing is you need to know, watch your players, see if they're having fun, and make sure that they're role-playing. And in order to make sure that you aren't just... Because one person might be having a ton of fun and focusing, and you might end up focusing in on them. Remember to say, okay, we're going to pause you there, because at the same time, these people are, especially if there's a whole bunch of people in different areas, you need to make sure that you're keeping track as to where all your characters are, especially if they decide, you know, we're in town, we should be safe, let's all go in different directions, which our party has done multiple times. And so I'm trying to keep track of where everyone is and make sure everyone is... I'm spending almost equal time, or as much equal time as I can on everyone. If somebody's character decides to go to sleep, well, yeah, they're going to end up not getting as much time. But sometimes you get some really good role play out of it. And the other thing I will say...
And sometimes you get the old stereotypes.
Role play can sometimes die once a fight starts. Because everyone's just going to go, I'm going to use this attack.
Yes.
Or, I'm doing this.
That is one thing I liked about the stunt system.
The one thing I don't like about the stunt system, though, is at a time it forces... especially if you're not that comfortable with that kind of system, eventually it can feel like a chore. Like, okay, I want to get at least 2 dice out of this. How many flourishes do I have to add before it becomes a 2-dice stunt?
You have to include interaction with the background.
Correct. But as I said, eventually it can get... And eventually it can also get to a point where you're just doing the same thing over and over to get the stunt.
And in which case it stops becoming a stunt.
Yeah.
And in which case it becomes a chore again.
Yeah.
See, that's why I like to amend it to, you're just basically role-playing during the fight. Yeah. You're not just going, I'm doing this attack. You're actually apparently getting into it, in which case I might say, okay, you're getting a +1 to your attack or something like that.
I'm also not a big fan of mechanical bonuses handing out for that kind of thing. Simply because you should be role-playing anyway. The game itself should be motivation for it. And I don't want to encourage that type of just role playing for the sake of mechanical bonuses.
It should, but I will have to admit, with our group, the first time I really saw somebody role play during a game was with bonuses.
Yeah. Sometimes
during a combat, I'm not as worried if you're if you're calling technically like game terms out. That doesn't bother me as much as some. I know, and for some DMs it can bother you, but just know your players and that kind of thing. If your players aren't the type to naturally do it, or aren't comfortable doing that kind of role playing for the battle purposes, I feel like adding mechanical bonus to it just makes that an extra chore. If your players are comfortable with that and like doing it, then it'd be fine to encourage it, but those players don't need the mechanical bonuses.
See, I also kind of added those bonuses quietly. So when they call out their damage, I'm like, okay, well, because they did that, that way they're like, oh man, it's sort of like, they don't really notice it, but it's sort of that psychology. If anyone did took a psychology class, there's positive reinforcement. They role-played, they were successful attacking, and they did more damage than they thought they were going to.
Yeah.
As like a hidden mechanic, okay. Because it's not going to encourage that type of awkward gamesmanship.
Yeah.
I can see that, but you gotta be careful with that too.
You do. I mean,
Because eventually your players might catch on.
they might, but
And
you
then they
kind
might... just be careful of, like, making that type of role-playing into into just a mechanical motion for players.
And
So-
eventually, hopefully, you should be able to weed off of it to the point where they're enjoying the role play. Because I think I was able to do that after a while. I was able to weed off of.
That might happen
the
too. That might
reward.
happen too. I mean, it just might not happen for all players.
No.
That's one of the reasons why in 5e I'm not a big fan of the inspiration system. I don't use it as often, and that's why I don't like some of the things in Savage Worlds for increasing your bennies, gaining your bennies back, because I feel like it doesn't happen, and we barely use the bennies anyway. So, but
Yeah.
So it just makes it more awkward and more mechanical, less. It just doesn't feel like role playing it for some players at that point. So definitely know your players with regard to those type of mechanical rewards for role playing. So.
But it's one suggestion for.
Depending on your group, you
Yeah.
might want to throw them like a few dog biscuits to help encourage.
Handle with care.
Handle with care.
But handle with care. Yeah. Because even I think with the psychology thing, sometimes they find out they know what you're doing. It's not going to work so much. So you
Eventually,
need to,
they become programmed to the bell
Yes.
and not the food. So.
Yep.
So. Definitely covered a lot. So.
If this is helpful, let us know.
Yep.
If there's anything else that you might have any questions on, about like last podcast or this podcast on building up your character, let us know, and maybe we'll continue do another talk about that during one of the other podcasts.
Yep.
I would also like to say something, because I have a tendency to do it. Don't necessarily. I mean, this is a little bit from a crunch angle, but don't discourage. That's not necessarily discourage min-maxing, as long as it's not game-breaking min-maxing. But if you see a player who's doing the min-maxing thing, don't necessarily discourage it, but try to work in their min-maxing things. Don't necessarily push them away from min-maxing. Work their natural tendencies into the role-playing. Unless barring game-breaking stuff. So, I mean, obviously you don't want game-breaking things in your game.
Mm-hmm.
Remember the social contract, people. Remember the social contract. Which is why, whenever I have a conversation with some of my other friends, and I mention some of the truly game-breaking stuff I found in any role-playing system, and they're like, oh, that's why I hate that system. And I'm like, well, I'm never going to play that or intentionally play that in any system you run, because I know it doesn't make it fun for you. So you don't really have to worry about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, we will see you all again next week. And just remember,
Don't kill us for PCs. Where's